I'm still pissed the green screen didn't work. I'm gonna figure that out because I think there's something there with Riverside and those cool little back. You totally for a half second were like, damn, that's such a cool thing, and then I moved one fraction of an inch, and you're like, you son
And it
of a
gets all
bitch.
pixelated. It's like, no, he's not actually in Hawaii. He's just in his son's bedroom somewhere.
I am indeed back in the son's bedroom. Yep.
Brilliant. Misfits, we're talking about failure. So I don't know. It's kind of speaks for itself. There's a sexy intro. Let's get into it. Roll the credits. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I am your host, Christopher Sellers.
From Portland, Oregon, I'm Broedy Chris.
And we're your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. What up, misfits? It's episode 68. We're talking about failure. We're talking about failure. We're going to discuss how we fail, why we fail. Do you fail? Am I a failure? We'll get all those things. I've got a few keynotes. But before we dive into it, last week we talked about success. We talked about the iceberg that was success. So this is sort of the flip side of it. But B, how did you find the episode on success? Like, anything interesting come up for you having that chat?
Yeah, it did. I mean, Misfits, go and listen to it. It didn't have much to do with failure because we knew we were going to have this conversation.
Yeah.
But I will say, little does Chris know, I've spent the last 2 weeks just fucking fighting with some of the comments that were made in that episode. So,
oh really?
That's me. That's me over the last
what on
few
your
weeks.
on your Insta or whatever?
Just the episode in general. There was a couple things, and it's funny because, you know, I listen to it more than once when I'm doing editing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that it generally hits me different each time. And this time it wasn't that the particular thing that I was focusing on or something like that hit me. It was that there was a different thing that hit me each time. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. And I think the most prominent one was when you and I were talking about the podcast, and there was an instance where both of us were kind of like, yeah, it's kind of a fucking failure. I really sat with that and had to like assess what was going on for me in that, because there was like things that I was reading on myself that I was like, bro, what the fuck, dude? It's not a failure kind of deal. It was interesting. It was interesting. So Chris put me into a fucking dark, shadowy corner for fucking 2 weeks, and he didn't even know it. But that was the success episode.
It's bright and happy from here on out. That's interesting. What I have kept actually from that last episode was something that you said that I still quite like, because we were discussing Misfits, like, are you a success? You know, and what does it mean to you? And Broedy said, like, I don't know if I'm a success, but I know I've had successes. And I think that I commented at the time, and it stayed with me for the last two weeks or so. I was like, I think that's a really constructive, healthy way to look at things, you know, rather than this thing being the be all and end all. It's like, no, you can time your shots and pick your spot and claim it when it's right. You know what I mean? But we'll get into that a bit more in this episode. But a very quick shout out to Nick and our boys at IGU, who's the sponsor for the Misfits for season 6. Like, IGU is an old game with a new twist where modern innovation and nostalgia come together to bring you Tag for today. Get it on the Google Store. Get it at the Apple Store. Play it with your friends. They sponsor us, and they're a bunch of cool guys. Failure, Broedy. Are you a failure?
Yeah. I mean, you asked me if I was a success, and I said depends on who you ask.
Listen, you're more than welcome to like drive the podcast. I mean,
look, it's not the same philosophy because I look at failures a little bit differently, and in not such the cliche sense that there's no such thing as a failure and it's only learning lessons and things like that. No, there's definitely hits I've taken in my life, and I definitely
Yeah.
think there's failures. You know what I mean? But I again, I don't necessarily keep track of them in such a way
Yeah.
that it really is more along the lines of, is it something that I learned from, or did that just sting? You know what I mean? And like, if it's a general kind of sting and like embarrassment, like that kind of thing, those are what I look at as the fails. You know what I mean? That's your L. That's, you took an L there.
Can you
Like where.
can you give us an example? And
Sure,
I'm
sure.
asking. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
So calling a shot early and then just being completely fucking off.
Like what?
Doing something.
Real life.
I mean, I mean, I don't really. I'm so good at like being cautious about the shots that I call that I haven't done it for like a while. So maybe that's not like
All
the
right.
greatest example, but that's
All right.
those are along the lines I'm
Let
talking
me
about.
reframe them. Let me reframe them.
Okay.
Can you pick a time in your life where you have failed, and you may or may not have learned anything at the time. You know what I mean? It was just you tried your best, you came up short, you fucked up, you lost.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I want this on the professional record, but fuck it. It's the Misfits and it's the B-sides of life. I mean, even in the last couple of years. So I was working, and Chris actually knows a little bit about this. I was working for I don't know if I want to name drop actually. Now that I'm thinking
A
about
company.
aloud, yeah, I was working for a marketing agency, and they got absorbed, and they got bought out and bought by a just much bigger agency. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
Boeing, Airbus, Nikon, Nike, all these ginormous contracts. Um, they offered me a month to month contractor's position as part of the absorption. I was the newest one on at the old agency that got absorbed. So it made sense. They didn't just cut me, they offered me the month to month thing. I think it was about 2 months into it, and I had realized that really that was not a long-term thing for me. And I knew that coming into it because I've always been
Mm-hmm.
contract based. I've always liked running my own thing. I really liked the autonomy of them giving me the month to month. The thing was, the more that it got into it, the more that I saw the tasks and the administrative stuff and like all the things that I would be doing. And God, it was such an awesome opportunity had I just stuck it out for another couple months and made some better connections. I
Okay.
didn't. I didn't. I really didn't. And I fucked it up bad, to the point that, like by the end of it, I was just not even coming to the company meetings, and just I was just not there, and you get the email and they're like, "Hey Brody, can we have a chat about your performance and blah blah blah." And
Would you like a representative? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then it you get to the meeting and they're like, "Hey, as much as we've loved having you on, your 30-day ends here. I think that's where we're gonna leave things, and this is why." And they just flat out told me too. They were just like, "Hey, this is why you have not been to meetings.
Okay.
When your initial output was being engaged, you had unique ideas, you had input, you had pushback. We had all of these things in all of these categories, and now it almost is like you're non-existent. We've really got to gauge that as your priority to the company, and we got to let you go. There's too
Okay.
many people that are way too hungry to be here." And they're not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They were absolutely not. There was tons of marketers just biting for that fucking position. And yeah, that was me. I fucked it up. And I didn't have perspective on the situation as where I feel I fucked up. Could have been something even better than it was for me. It was a great stepping stone
Right.
as it was. and I
Yeah.
did make a handful of good connections that have kind of carried me through the last couple years, which are fantastic. But imagine had
Hmm.
I really sunk in and performed for those couple months and then said, hey, I'm looking to I would have just had support of everybody involved and some really
Yeah. Right.
big names in the industry. And again, that's my failure. That's my fuck up, and I definitely look at it as such. And I'm so
How did you feel?
I'm gonna be honest. There's a little bit of shame involved. I feel more than anything
Yeah.
because
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
because I was being looked at as this kid that was just given this fucking crazy opportunity that this agency did not take anybody on that they didn't want. They offered me a month to
Yep.
month contract. They even had made mention of my work and some of the things that I had done with them. Yeah, there's a little bit of shame with that one, where I was like, fuck, dude, I look like a clown. I look like an asshole. I look like I
Mm.
fucking just do not care. I look like that guy that just
Mm.
said fuck it and quit without saying anything, the shitty version of the Irish goodbye, like, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that's how I felt, honestly. I mean, still sometimes I try not to get wrapped up in regret, and I'm sure that will come up later in the episode or something like
Well,
that. But
that was my next question. Like, did you? And I'm asking specifically, and I'll explain why, and then I'll have my turn as well, so it's fair for
mhm.
everyone. But the reason I'm asking is, do you think you realized it at the time, or in hindsight, you're like, oh man, I fucked that up. Like that was the brass ring, and I just tossed it. Or like back then, we like, fuck them, fuck the company. Nah, 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 nah.
Yeah, I mean, it took a little bit. It took a little bit. I think because of the connections that I made and the success that I had leaving, where I wasn't just in a
Yeah,
trash pit and I wasn't in a fuck situation. I was silently patting myself on the back to compensate for the
right.
loss that I just took. But
Yeah,
uh
the ego kicks in because I'm better than you anyway.
oh yeah, totally. It totally did. Because and look, I'll admit this. There was a point where in that assessment, uh, when they had said, it just kind of seems like you're not here and you're not present. I almost wanted to just be like, fucking, you don't even know the shit that I've done. Then kind of attitude, deal.
Yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah.
I'll go do it for myself and compete against you guys, kind of deal. Which, granted, you know what? There was one specific instance where, again, I per that contract's sake and that person, I took it from a giant marketing agency. You know what I mean? And that again was
Yeah, right
because of
on.
the work that I done and things like that. But
Yep.
that was it. That was it. It wasn't 15,000 people following me and
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
going, "Oh, you're the guy that worked for that agency." No, it was that one motherfucker that I basically had to beg and ask to come over. But yeah, shame, not so much regret. And that's just me though. But because I
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
think anything that I spend too much time in that arena with ends up becoming a gladiator I'm fighting against, and I just don't like to
Right.
overwhelm myself with that. I know
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
even when I'm being diabolical and masochistic, I know, okay, you're fighting five fucking dudes right now. You need to take on what you can take on, and fucking
Yep.
let's limit the damage you're about to fucking take. But no,
Mm.
okay. So you say, same thing. Failure. Is there one that sticks out in your head that's just like that? Yeah, that was
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There is. I even posted about this during this week on LinkedIn. So if you're connected, you can go out and check that. But one that's visceral that kind of stays with me was my first feature film script
Mm-hmm.
that I wrote. And before I produced it, I obviously was submitting it to film production agencies. And at the time, Hopscotch Films was still a thing, and they were like a great indie production house and whatever. And I managed to get the full script into Hopscotch. So, for those who don't know, that is kind of a big deal. Like, first you've got to sort of find. Hopscotch were cool because they were one of the few production companies that you could just directly submit to without jumping through tons of red tape and knowing people. They had a submission portal. So you'd send them your one sheet first. And so I had a drafted one sheet of the film. So for those who don't know, it's a one sheet literally of what's the log line of the film. So one sentence of what it's about. What's the synopsis? So that's one paragraph of what's it about. And then like a breakdown of demographic, cast, who's attached, all this sort of stuff, all in one piece of paper. So imagine trying to take 120 pages of a film, distill it into one sentence, and then distill it into a paragraph. Like, that's how well you've got to know your craft in order to get a script made these days. So this is back in the day. So I got it in, like the synopsis got accepted. And I got an email from them saying, we'd love to have a look at the full script. And,
That's why you're so good at marketing. I'm sorry, but like
I hate marketing, bro.
It just I know I don't care if you hate it. You're fucking fantastic at it, and it has to come from that, right? Like, how punchy can I make an entire movie in one line? Like, can I make you get it in one fucking line? That's why you're so goddamn good at marketing, dude. Hands down.
Well, it's thank you, but it took fucking work. It takes a lot of work, and that's why I sort of laugh when copywriters are like, "Oh, get your hook. Oh, your hook is this and that." I'm like, bitch, please. Like,
half their hooks have been written by AI.
Right. So staying on point. So the synopsis went through, and then I got a reply saying, "Hey, can we have a full script, please?" And this is a big fucking deal. Like, it's like, hey, it was a big fucking deal. I'm like, holy shit. So I get the script together, which I'd already polished like 1,000 times. Made sure my name was spelled right. Made sure my contact details were correct. And then sent it off to Hopscotch. And normally film, the review process is anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. So, and that's basically what they quoted me, if I remember. So that means like 4 to 6 weeks, I'm hanging. You know what I mean? But also, and it's enough
Limbo.
news to like be hanging out. Yeah, it's enough news to be hanging out with your fellow actors going, bro, script got accepted by Hopscotch. And they're like, shit, man, that's fucking amazing, man. That's fuck yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're talking it down because, the adult, she's accepted. We don't know yet. No. But it's enough hype. Like, those who know. And so this went on through about just trying to keep it easy for 4 to 6 weeks. And somewhere between that 4 to 6 week mark, I got the reply. And I remember it. Well, I remember the evening because I was walking down Park Street in Sydney through Hyde Park with my girlfriend at the time. And I got the email on my phone and I looked at her. And so I opened it and then read it. And it was basically like, hey, we loved it. We're going to pass in this case, blah, blah. And I swear to God, it was like someone put a shotgun to my chest and pulled the trigger. And I broke down. I in the 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, broke down in the middle of the Hyde Park, like curled up on the fucking grass. And my girlfriend was like rubbing my back. Yeah.
Just because I don't know, you know what I mean? So like a lot of people, like for instance with like book manuscripts and things like that, they'll get denied. They'll get denied 50 fucking times. Is this kind of a scenario where like this if it didn't make it here, it was for sure not going to make it somewhere else? Is why it felt like it was the failure that you're talking about?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so there's for a little bit of context, like the Australian arts industry is very different from the US arts industry. The US, like film film or funding or indie film and that sort of thing culturally seems to be a lot more accepted, and even financially to find funding seems to be a lot more accepted. Like not easier, but just accepted as a hustle. Over here, the arts is a bit of a joke. Like, and before, okay, yeah, and like this was specifically before streaming. Okay, it's before streaming services came along, and then production boomed everywhere because everyone needs content, right?
Right.
I used to get more respect standing behind a counter making coffee in Australia than I ever did saying I'm an actor and a screenwriter. You know,
Do
so
you
this
feel
was
like
just
that's
like
changed today?
I probably by 1 or 2 degrees. Even though the film and television production industry is thriving more than it ever has done in the last 50 years, because again, like everyone wants content, and anyone in the English speaking world has realized that Australia has great facilities, they have professional crew, and then you're basically paying Australian dollars, which is generally less, you know, than the US, you know, whatever, right? So production wise, it's great, but still like not hugely accepted, which is why I think, yeah, I'd written the film.
So the
after
starving artist is still
London.
The starving artist here
In Australia, 1,000%.
Okay,
and that's probably part of my sort of naivety or drive or passion had come from, like, I'd just come back from London, where I could literally stand behind a bar, pour you a cocktail, someone would say, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm an actor and a writer," and they go, "Cool, what are you working on?" And they'd respect you, they'd engage, they'd fucking give a shit. Whereas Australia, you'd kind of get laughed at. You know what I mean? So then that
weird fucking culture shock too, bro. And I just have to say this, just from outside in, it being home that you're going back to that feeling with, God, that would fucking blow, dude. That would, not to rub salt on a wound, but fuck.
No. And yeah, look, and so like hopscotch wasn't like the one shot fucking dream. To get funding in Australia, you normally have to go through Films Australia, which is a government organization, and it's incredibly difficult because you need a professional, you need a pro producer or a pro director or a pro fucking someone in your pocket,
right?
Because they're going to go like, I'm going to invest 100,000. How are we going to secure this 100,000? You know what I mean? And specifically, and like, yes, it was an indie film, and specifically it was about Australia and our culture and, you know, this sort of thing. And I think if I remember, thanks for reminding me, the feedback was from Hopscotch was, we feel it's too narrow of a subject to appeal to a broader audience, because it was fundamentally one guy's coming of age story, which was representative of why I think Australia should become independent rather than be under the Commonwealth. Right. So, but Hopscotch felt that was too narrow for an international market. And so if I'd already applied for, let's say 20 others, or like searched around and hustled and done and spent a year or two writing it, draft upon draft, to get it to this level, to submit one sheets to anyone that you can find, to finally get in the door at Hopscotch, who was a really great fit, to then kind of get let into the foyer going, hey, can we get a full script? You get a full script, you wait 4 to 6 weeks to then get the email saying, we think this is probably too narrow for a broad audience. And it
which
fucking
is so
me.
Weird. I mean, look at the landscape after the fact, right? Because I mean, because look, what everything culturally shifted to where it was like, how do we learn more about Asians? How do we learn more about us? Like all that shit.
1,000%.
Like,
and yeah, 1,000%. And look, it doesn't matter. There's no point arguing with the voice on the other end of the screen. You know, normally production houses like that, they will have what's the word I'm looking for? They'll have a plan of what sort of films they're taking on. You know what I mean? Like, we need a comedy, we need a drama, we need a documentary, we need this and that. So like, if you don't fit into that thing, then if you're not on the menu, not on the menu. Anyway, so yeah, that fucking broke me. And sort of, grown man crying in front of his girlfriend, probably for the first time, and she's kind of having to hold me together. And I was like, fuck, it wasn't, it's interesting because in this post I said, look, it wasn't about the money, like that would have been nice, and it wasn't about like the fucking fame, like that would have been nice. It's like you have a vision, you have sort of a dream, if you will, but you have a vision, you want things to change, you think that, still believe that art and creativity can change it, and like a good story and a fucking great film because historically it's been done, and I'm going to be that guy, and someone says no, and I'm like, fuck, and it shattered me. Now, like, to skip ahead, I ended up producing the film myself, and that's another story for another time. But when someone says, like, have you ever failed? It's like, yeah, I came up short here. And like, what was the lesson? I don't know. I didn't tick someone's box. I don't know. I did my very best
so this is what I wanted to touch on.
And played the rules of the game. And
this is what I want to touch on, right? Like, it's really hard for me. And this is what I meant earlier by trying to classify a failure, right? Like, same thing that you're kind of talking about. And I'm not being that like cliche net positive fucking that wasn't a failure because you learned something guy. No, why I say that is because even then, that's why for me my failures are labeled as such, is because I can't put a finger on what I could have done differently. In same way that you were just about to describe how you're like, I don't really know what the lesson was because I gave my all. I put it out. It was there. I was right. I was at the finish line, like, kind of thing. That's like I said, that's when it's an L for me, is when I can't fucking figure it out, dude. Like, I should have. And obviously the thing that's frustrating about like that kind of scenario for me is like, because then you just have to admit sometimes you fucking failed. Like I
sometimes
know
you lose.
Right.
It's
you are there's not always a silver lining. I love people like that, and I live like that. I really try to, especially with kids. You gotta, you know what I mean? You gotta give them some little shred of light in the darkest situations, or they'll fucking become little shadow goblins. But that, there's sometimes you just
so there's
you just can't.
There's a reason I wanted to dive into this, and there's a reason I wanted to dive into to both of us, and especially for the Misfits listening at home, is because there's a couple of cliched schools of thought on failure, which I kind of wanted to fucking call out. And you've already mentioned it, like, oh, there's always a lesson to be learned. It's not a failure if you learn something. And you go, it's nice. It's nice if failure and learning overlap on the Venn diagram. It's nice.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
It's a nice thing if that happens, and you might not realize it at the time, and you might realize it like, with a bit of distance, great. Sometimes, like we just said, sometimes there is no lesson. It's just like, you lost. So now figure out what you want. Deal with losing. What do you want to do?
Right. The what's next doesn't justify the loss, right?
Right. So in this case, it was, I lost. It fucking demolished me. I took some time, sort of regrouped, pulled the shreds of my ego back together and go, no, it doesn't mean I'm a failure. Me personally, it doesn't mean the project is shit. These guys just said no. And I've shopped this around to enough people that I respect and who have some credible insight. They all swear by it. So my decision from this loss, rather than go, I can't write, I'll never be anyone, is to produce this myself. Like, so that's the choice that I made. Right. But the other school of thought, which equally pisses me off, and it's specific to corporate, is like, oh no, failure is great because you learn, and so fail often and fail fast. Like, just fucking get those ideas, just like make those plans, take action. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because no motherfucking captain ever wrote a log in hopes that anyone that followed the path after him didn't fucking have to go through all the shit that he's logging.
Right.
I mean, no, don't use that. Just continue to fucking fail, because you'll learn the same way he did and have the same fucking information.
Or just act irresponsibly, act recklessly, act stupid, like call it a learning experience after the fact and just sort of shrug off and keep rolling. Like, for real?
So it kind of ties into a little bit one of the things that Joyce had mentioned.
Okay.
I want to talk about it too, because she specifically talks about failures in youth, right? Like, and like we're talking about here, where it's like a lot of people are like, oh, you're a kid, you're gonna make fucking mistakes, go do dumb shit, experience all the fucked up stuff, like blah blah blah, have a drink, have a smoke, blah blah blah, right? And it just is that way. Hey, run into walls. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna fucking hurt, but it's necessary. It's so necessary. Bro, I'm so fucking over that shit. What about it is fucking necessary? Same thing where I'm like, dude, now as a grown-ass man, I've been through my shit. I've made my fucking running into walls decisions. I look back, dude, there was always some sort of information available to me that would have helped me avoid that shit.
Right.
110 fucking %. But nobody was telling me, hey, look for the information. They weren't saying that. They were saying, hey, you're not gonna fucking find it until it fucking smacks you in the face. Are you kidding me? Out of the fucking billions of human beings that have been alive, out of the history of fucking recorded text, I couldn't find something that could have helped me along my fucking way, that I could have avoided some of the failures that everybody fucking talks about. That's asinine, dude. That's asinine. Like telling a fucking girl to go fucking be with as many dudes as fucking possible because you're just gonna fucking learn yourself. Bro, okay, you know how many
just
fucking...
get it out of your system.
Dude, and you know how many of those fucking women
but
are...
honestly, hang on, but honestly, like the same for boys as well. Like, oh, dude,
right,
just
yes.
fucking...
Yes,
you know, sow your seed. Fuck yeah.
Right, bro. Yes, 100%. And then how many of those dudes are stuck in fucking sexless, fucked up, horrible relationships because that's the path that they fucking took. That's the wall that they hit, right? And it's so funny to me too, because I like I said, I'm with you. The cliche is so fucking ridiculous that it's just... there's no logic to it. To me, it's not as cliche and fucking profound as everybody says it is. I'm just like, God damn, that came from a bunch of fucking assholes. Like that was a bunch of dickheads who did the same shit. Wisdom,
right, you know?
Bro. And my thing is like, somewhere along the way, someone had to be like, bro, these is just dudes that continue to repeat shitty patterns and try to justify it. That's what that is. That's what that shit is. And you don't have to. You don't. Well, you don't have to.
That's why we're having this chat. You know what I mean? It's sort of like when do you learn and what do you learn? But the other half of this discussion on failure, which I did want to tap into for this second half of this sort of episode, is, look, what about the fear of failure? Right? And so, you know, either personally or professionally, like, how does that play into our lives? Because a quick glance on any sort of social media or discussion with anyone, it's like, well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you ask the pretty girl out? Or why didn't you raise your hands and answer the question? Or why didn't you take this opportunity? It's like, because I didn't want to fuck it up. I didn't want to, like, you know, have this thing. So and, like, is fear of failure a thing for you?
I'm going to be honest. No, I wish that wasn't such a quick and immediate response. But I will say this, that I'll qualify it, because I've failed so much and had to become okay with the L's and the failures that like at some
Yeah.
point there was almost a disassociation with it, to the fact that it's like, hey, same thing as the successes almost, right? Like, I am not any one of these things, bro. That would be fucking actually crazy to think that I'm any one of these things. Failures included, like failures
Mhm.
included. And I, look, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, right? But I think one of the things that I try not to get stuck on in, accordance to failures and shame and things like that, is if I'm fearful about something, if even there's a little voice through all of my craziness that says don't do this, instead of really hearing that as don't do this, I start to hear the echo of why, right? Like, what about that? So
Yeah, yeah.
it really, and I go through the list really quickly, right? Where it's like, okay, is physically this going to put me in danger? No, probably
Right.
not. Justifiably, is this going to put any of my relationships in danger? Nope, probably not.
Yep.
Financially, nope. And I go through this list and I'm like, oh my
Yeah, yeah,
God,
yeah.
it's just this irrational fucking basis that I'm concerned about how someone's going to perceive the endeavor itself, not even the result, right? Because most people don't even know the results. I'm sorry. You could go out and do
Yeah.
whatever the fuck you want, Misfits. And yes, someone's going to have an opinion, right? And they might even be right. Right? They might even be right. They'll never fucking know, though. They will never fucking know, because they are not you. They did not experience this. They weren't there. It's there's such a power in that for me, and it's this is where I'm going to sound so funny, but like, if you ever want to, I think, what am I trying to say here? If you ever want to condition yourself against that fear of failure, make social media content. I really mean that. Like, and make your social media content. Don't just go fucking copy a video just to copy a video. Like, sit with yourself for a second, say, okay, this is what I want to create. Try to create it, and then just post it. 20 minutes after you post the video, you're going to have watched it 17,000 fucking times, and you're going to go, wow, I could have done this. I could have done that. I could have done this. You're also going to see that there are some people out there that probably like the direction that you're going in, right? That's the fucking pot for, or every kettle, or whatever the fuck the saying is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Someone out there will like what you've got going on. The fear of the people that don't, or and you and I talk about this a lot, throwing to the void, like that too it's irrational. I'm sorry, but it's irrational. I have that fear, but it's irrational, right?
Mm.
Like, because again, if
Mhm.
I go
Mhm.
scream at the top of my lungs at the top of a mountaintop, sure, no one's going to hear it, and the release that I'm getting is only personal, but you're not going to argue that there isn't some sort of release. That's the
Mhm.
concept I'm trying to say here, and that's,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think, what a
Mhm.
lot of people miss is, because of the fear, because you're associating so heavily with the perception of someone else's opinion, you don't do certain things. You don't scream at the top of a mountain. You don't post the content. You don't do the thing. You're never challenged in your own self to see past that point. And that
Mm.
sucks. That sucks. That sucks. That's the scariest thing for me. So, no, fear of failure has never, kind of been an issue in terms of me approaching what I'm doing or things I'm trying. The
Mhm.
biggest fear for me is that the fear of failure stops me from even fucking going any place at all.
Yeah. Yeah,
That,
yeah, yeah.
and like I said, I didn't want to get too philosophical, but that's what it is for me. I think again, the more that I assess and journal and log, It's 9 times out of 10, it's just irrational as fuck. I'm being irrational as fuck about my fear. And I'm giving way too much power or credit to something outside of the project itself. The fuck? The fuck? And if I only do things for a sense of validation from others, I'm fucked up to begin with. I'm begging for fucking pain for the rest of my fucking life. I mean, that's just me. Fuck.
No, yeah. I hear you.
Are you afraid?
It's a similar sort of answer. Look, I'll say yes, but that's sort of that's always like the green flag to go. You know, so
I love it that way. Okay.
So you know, it's sort of like, well, you're all sitting in the room, like, who's going to get up first? And if there's that initial anxiety, for me, like, that's now become like, okay, let's go. Like, you step up, you be the first one. Like, are you really going to write a second book? Yeah, we should. Yeah, now I have to. You know, and it's when I feel that little bit of insecurity, doubt, anxiety, that blank white space in front of me, I'm like, well, fuck, now I have to do it. You know, rather than pass on whatever the opportunity may be. So it's very similar to what you described. Now, having said that, last week, so Misfits, for real-time context, I'm probably a couple of weeks out from second book launch with a whole bunch of shit going on. Like, I'm trying to pull marketing together. I'm trying to pull self-publishing, ebook, paperback, online course has just gone live. Like, a whole bunch of moving cogs in this thing. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but like, in the middle of all this stuff going on, I got offered a photography exhibition in New York by the lovely Sanal up in her art gallery. Anyway, so ridiculous, like, amazing opportunity, but in the middle of all this project work. So imagine you've got essays all around, and then someone comes along and gives you a birthday cake, and you're like, that's fantastic. I love cake. I don't have the time to eat it right now. Anyway, so, but like, sort of folded this in into like, folded this in terms of what I needed to do and how it needs to work out. So just like kind of put it on a thing. So on the Tuesday, amazing opportunity, I was trying to piece it all together. By the Wednesday morning, I was anxious as fuck. I had, like, you know, that fist in the middle of your chest, like, grinding you. I could see the projects in front of me that I needed done by the end of the week. I wasn't panicking, but I could feel like the anxiety was simmering. And shout out to my boy Owen in Philly, because I shot him a quick message and I'm like, hey, yo, it's my turn to talk about shit. And he's like, let's go. And I said, look, this is where I'm feeling. I just, like, I've got all this book stuff on, I've got all these projects, like, blah, 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 and the online course. And it feels like a snowball that's getting away from me. You know what I mean? So it's just, and I know I can do it. Like, same what you're describing. Cognitively, I know I can do it. Functionally, I know I can do it. Emotionally and psychologically, it just feels like fuck, and it's kind of getting away from me. And I don't know what's going to happen. And Owen made the really, really good point. And he's like, dude, I hear you. Totally natural, especially like for high functioning creatives, like rah, rah, rah. What it really is like, this sensation of it's getting away from you is like, it's because it is like, you've pushed the snowball, you've done all the work. Now it's rolling bigger and faster than what you anticipated, right? So you know, it's going to be bigger than you, right? So there's a little bit of release involved, and that's what the anxiety is. It's like, you don't want to grab a hold of it to make the snowball slower and smaller. You want it to fucking roll,
right?
And he was right, and so tapping into this, it's like, and it's something that I say to people all the time, and I'll take my own advice for fuck's sake, is we are less, I even wrote it in the first book, we are less afraid, fear of failure is sometimes a thing, but I'd reason it's less of a thing than we realize, right? So you listen to Broedy and I talk about fear of failure. We both shared our stories. It both sucked. Fucking devastating. Feels like shit. Brody's full of shame. I'm the same. Complete fail. Never be anybody. Crying in a public park. Fucking hell. You know, all this sort of stuff, right? Doesn't kill you. Feels really, really shitty. Doesn't kill you. But sure. And so we learn, really, really shitty feeling. I don't want to ever feel like that again. right? And so it's natural to avoid it. Like it's natural and human for us to want to avoid pain.
Natural instinct.
That's sane. That is absolutely sane, right? But, and here's the big asterisk. We know what failure feels like. It feels shitty. But then, like, in a week or two, you'll be over it, right? Success. You've got no idea what success looks like. If you do the thing and they applaud, if you do the thing and they say, Broedy, fucking great idea, man. If you ask the pretty girl and she goes, I love you, like why took you so long? If you write the book and you get the awards, if you do the thing and you get paid, if you take the chance, if you do the work and someone says yes, then you succeed. Then what happens? You've got no idea because you haven't been there. Now, the unknown, the void of the unknown is more terrifying than your aversion to the pain of failure.
Yep. 100%. 110%. And I love the way that you frame that, because I think that's the stark reality for a lot of people, is that the other side of success is more of an unknown than the familiarity of failure. And fuck, it's hard, bro.
But it is. But you ask anyone, oh, why don't you do that? Or why don't you finish the thing? Or like whatever it happens to be. Even if you reflect on some of your own projects, like why didn't you finish it? Why didn't you see it through? Your reflex response will be, like a fear of failure, or like whatever, or sort of shrug, or it's hard, or make any excuse you want. Because if you started out to do the thing thinking and feeling you could do it, and you could follow all the way through. And if you succeeded, or if you completed it, or you took it to the end, on the other side of that is going to be a new field and somewhere you haven't been before. And then what do you do? It's like, oh shit, I don't know, so
right.
That's
yeah.
It's knowing, I guess it's knowing which one knowing which one is which. Again, there's not 100% overlap on the Venn diagram,
No.
So we can, and that's why I really wanted to get into it in this episode particularly, is because when we break down fear, like, yes, it's a psychological thing. Yes, it has an emotional reaction. Yes, we have some avoidance to pain, but that doesn't always mean failure, right? So let's be clear about that. And on the other side, like, naively, failing isn't winning. Failing isn't always learning either.
Right.
It's not a zero-sum game. So let's be savvy, Misfits. Let's have a bit of reflection and get an idea of, what challenges it is you're actually working with.
Right. It's funny because you say this, and where this brings me is one of the questions Joyce had too was, has anybody ever made you feel like a failure? So somebody outside of yourself, right? Right. Yeah. So you sit with that and you think with that for a second. And of course, I mean,
that's a good question.
Oh, it is, right? But then you start to kind of analyze those moments and those situations, and you're like, but really, ultimately, right? Like, again, ask yourself subjectively, do I feel like I failed in that situation? And I'm gonna be honest with you, a lot of the times, it specifically like childhood traumatic memories where, dad's yelling at you or whatever the hell it is. You look back at those even, and you're like, I wasn't doing anything that bad. Wow. The amount of shame that someone else felt in that exact scenario to make me try to make me feel as much, if not more, shame than they do for it. That's fucking crazy, bro. That's crazy. And the reason that I wanted to talk about it for a second, because like I'm sitting here, listening to you hash this out, and like there's not a piece of me that wants to look at anything that you've done and innately go, wow, you're a fucking failure, bro. Like, you suck. Like, I want to do what we were talking about earlier with that cliche silver lining, right? Like I want to try to silver line everything. It's just interesting that we do have scenarios in our lives and moments in time where, yeah, I can look back and someone definitely tried to make me feel like I was responsible or I failed, and that's interesting. You know what I mean? Because we talk a lot about like the things that we naturally feel, or situations that would present fear of failure or failure itself in those kind of situations. How often is it imposed on you, right? And to me, I'm sitting here, I'm like, God damn, more often than I think the opposite, right? Where I think somebody had just took a second to say, yo, bro, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. I mean, childhood is definitely one, but then employment has got to be like a very close second. Like you're given the hoops that you have to jump through, you know?
With quarterly reviews on the fucking horizon.
Yeah. And that's what always pissed me. And to this day, this is always what pissed me off about corporate, is like there was always accountability in inverted commas for KPIs not being met and all this sort of shit. And I'd always raise my hand and go, what about the 90% of other stuff that runs smooth and didn't break and was flawless? You know, like that doesn't just happen by magic. That's people doing their job consistently well, and just like, yeah, sure, that's what you're paying them to do, but that's what they're doing well. Like they're not, it's not, it takes 2 seconds to say, great job. This has been perfect. This has gone so smoothly. You know what I mean? And cost nothing. Anyway, that's a rant for another time.
Yeah. No, I wanted to point that out. Just that in particular, that it's so interesting that, sitting here listening to you break it down, like my natural inclination is to be like, bro, I think you're dope. I think your fucking books are fucking dope. I think I would still like to see that fucking screenplay, accepted somewhere.
You're not the
and
first
produced
person
someday.
to say, I've got it there somewhere. Yeah.
That's what I mean, fuck, dude. And it's just so interesting that, again, not only do we tend to see the opposite from people, but man, we do it to ourselves too. Like, I would not be sitting there to myself going, you're dope, dude. Like, your fucking social media shit's sick. Like, you're fucking cool. Like, I love your podcast. Like, you're cool, bro. Like, and it's just interesting that wiring is so prevalent. And I wonder if now, having talked about it, right, like that's the fear for me, where I'm like, bro, that's the thing that fucking scares me. That's the monster under the bed, is that the fear of the silence, right? That nobody's ever going to validate anything you're doing ever.
Yeah. I know we're right at the end, but you mentioning that has just brought this up, because I think last week we touched on a little bit, like, do you consider yourself a success? And I said no, and I'm sitting here going, I'm pretty sure my default setting is you're a failure, which is why I have to
default setting. Oh my god!
But like to explain, because like my default setting is you're a failure, so that's why it's always like, next book, next project, next film, next thing, next da. Because if I'm not doing the thing, if I don't have the project, if I'm not working on fucking changing the world, then I'm backsliding into less potential and failure. So I didn't say it was healthy. I didn't say it was healthy. I didn't say it was sane.
I like that though. Backsliding into loss of potential failure, like that right there too. I think, God,
backsliding into mediocre. Yeah,
fuck, bro. Like that's the failure for me. And I think in the big fear, right, is just, God, and I'm gonna sound like such a fucking prick, but like I just am so terrified of being average, bro. I'm so terrified. I'm fucking terrified of being average. Scares the fuck out of me.
I think you'd be safe.
I think so too. I really do. But like,
I
oh
think
my
so too.
god, dude.
I think you'll be safe. I think you'll be okay.
It was
All right,
it was pretty
Misfits.
cool. I will say this, Misfits.
Yeah.
We've gotten we're getting back into our engagement and doing some things that help there, and seeing you guys pop back up, which is a huge thing. One of the things is because I'm doing that, the Professional Misfits will come up on suggested searches around the devices on the house. And the kids were watching one of the podcasts the other day, and
Aw.
and it was very cool because I don't think they were really watching. It was just on, and just be able to
Yeah.
say dad's on the TV kind of thing.
Right.
They told me that it was cool. None of my friends' parents have podcasts. Nobody I know has a podcast. And look, the thing though that I do want to say is, like, it does give you a little perspective, because again, that big fear of mediocre for me, where I'm like, I still have all of the boxes checked for average. I have kids, I have the car, I have the house payment, I have the groceries. Like, I have all that stuff too. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think the fact that my kids also somewhat feel like I'm an interesting guy, it helps.
That's a win.
It
That's a
is.
success.
It is. Yes.
All right, Misfits, that's episode 68. How are you feeling about failure? Hopefully you're feeling mixed. We talk about everything, we solve nothing.
Better than successes, because I walked away from successes.
Better than success. The irony. But that wraps up episode 68. Episode 69, teehee, we're talking about something fun. We're going to talk about pet peeves. So get ready, Misfits. Like, all the little pet peeves, we're going to get them out. I'm not giving any of them away, but I'll probably have to take a note of like at least 2 or 3 PG pet peeves. PG, Broedy, PG. So that's what.
Yeah, God, fucking YouTube, Jesus.
Oh yeah. After it spanked us last time, outrageous. Anyway, Misfits, thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, come find us on LinkedIn, find us on Spotify, find us on YouTube, find Broedy on all the Instagram things. That's cool. Keep an eye out for my book, Why Smart People Aren't Creative, and there's a free online course, which I think by the time this comes out, you should still be able to access, which is really, really cool. In the meantime, we'll see you for episode 69. I've been Chris.
I've been Broedy.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one.